Welcome to this new episode of Becoming a Postgrowth Planner, Challenges and Obstacles to Changing Roles and Practices. I'm Christian Lamker, Assistant Professor at the University of Groningen, and I'm honored today to have Robert Kitzmann with me.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. I'm very glad and thankful for the invitation. I'm an economic geographer working at Humboldt University in Berlin since already 2012, so I'm in my 10th year. I'm specialized in topics of housing and neighborhood management. Since roughly half a year, I'm dealing particularly with the role of post-growth or degrowth planning within the housing sector. And I'm glad that we can talk about it today.
Great. Yeah, we met in Berlin in early May with a number of international students, and I've learned a lot about your perspective on growth conflicts in Berlin.
Let me first give a very rough historic overview just since 1990 for the audience. So after 1990, everyone expected Berlin to be a global city like Paris, London, having 6 million inhabitants. But very soon they realized that they rather had an economic downturn, losing a lot of residents, a lot of jobs. And so until the 1990s, there was basically not much new economic activities going on. And just since the middle of the 2000s, Berlin has experienced some kind like a catch-up development where a lot of international capital is coming into the city in various sectors and parts. And so just since 10, 15 years, Berlin is really experiencing this growth conflicts, particularly in the field of housing. Another big point is, for example, shopping. Yeah, because East Berlin was a very planned and centered economic situation where especially the Alexanderplatz, the center, was economically important. But since the 1990s, they established a lot of shopping malls in terms of center developments. Yeah, so they brought in a lot of new investors, just this shopification, let's say it this way, bringing in international development. Maybe the audience has already heard of the Tempelhofer Feld, former airfield, where the Senate has tremendous plans of developing this airfield. But this was actually a good example how to counteract this growth development, because the development that the Senate planned were not fulfilled due to residents' resistance.
Which debates did that trigger in the whole city that Tempelhofer Feld was then not built with housing or other uses?
So, I mean, a very prominent debate, I mean, certainly not only in Berlin, is a who owns the city debate. Particular since, especially in the field of housing, since the 1990s, a lot of privatization was going on. And in order to build housing on the Tempelhofer Feld, some of these city-owned land would have to be privatized as well. And so the residents were extremely against it. And not only residents living in the vicinity, but residents all over the city. And I mean, a very crucial point was that the residents were in fear of that's no social housing that would have been built, but basically private investments, condominiums, and the like. And so it was rejected tremendously or massively.
If you talk about all these impacts on Berlin and the housing market, shopping, and financial aspects, how would you all see the financialization of the whole urban development and how this has developed?
Like I said, I think the city during the last 5 years, it might have changed a little, but throughout the 2000s particularly, the city was really happy to attract investors, economic activities. During the downturn in the 1990s, a lot of these brownfields, especially in East Berlin, it was really not used at all in an economic way. There were a lot of temporary uses, bars, beach clubs, and so on. In the early middle 2000s, there was kind of this tipping point, where Berlin got attractive, got the awareness of international financial investors. And so these caused a lot of conflicts because especially on these areas where these temporary users were located, yeah, the city was happy that at least some users use these brownfields. These are the areas where we have a lot of conflicts, because now the tenant wants to have, okay, it's just a temporary use, and now just like go away. We have these new investors that we are really happy to have finally, and attract massive jobs like Mercedes-Benz, like in the former East Harbor region and so on. There are so many developments where you can experience this change of users, causing a lot of conflict.
In your experience and your research, how did the public opinion change over this time about these developments, or the rejection thereof? Is there temporary uses that are moved out for more economic uses, Tempelhofer Feld, where development was rejected?
I mean, the public opinion on this change was from the beginning very negative about it. Yeah, because even though in the 1990s it was just a, let's say, plan B option, at some point these the residents got used to this, like, let's say, undervalued uses. Yeah, like for example, Tempelhofer Feld basically was a park setting, but of course residents really quickly adjusted to these new developments, took use of it. They took use of all the beach bars and all the other temporary uses. And from the point that the Senate started to grab the land of these users, the residents immediately tried to form initiatives and so on to counteract these kind of development.
So I see there's some kind of openness also towards post-growth or degrowth ideas. But on the other side, there are also housing needs, and different housing needs also for different people. And I've learned that you have worked on an example of housing exchange, Wohnungstausch in Berlin. So can you maybe take us there, what this means and what challenges it kind of reacts to?
Yeah, actually, I mean, housing exchange or home swap is nothing new. Yeah, but Berlin, with its like 6 city-owned housing companies established in 2012, the general idea that the residents of the city-owned housing units should have the opportunity to exchange housing units. There were basically in the beginning like 2 rationales. The first was getting older people like out of their bigger flats, let's put it this way, yeah, and or maybe not get them out, but maybe to offer them smaller flats and options in order to reduce their rent burdens. Yeah, that was one rationale. And the second rationale was then to create living space for younger families that are which are in need of like 3 or 4 room apartments. So, and this did not work very well because the exchange was only possible within the respective companies. And just in 2018, they initiated like a digital platform where the residents of all 6 housing companies could change their flats even among the companies. So there were no companies borders in exchanging. And I mean, these are like actually 330,000 flats. So this exchange instrument would exhibit like 300,000 flats. Yeah, and this within the last 6 years, and the rationale has really changed a little bit more to having this instrument as like one little piece of reducing rents, yeah, and reducing rent burden, and better allocating the housing space of like single household, the grandma with like 80 square meters, and the young family, I don't know, 3 people sitting in like 40 or 50 square meters. Yeah, to have these exchange and have a little like, let's call it spatial justice here.
And how did it then work practically? So let's say if you move, especially these days, you have to pay much more per square meter in Berlin. So was there a similar rent then when moving, or additional support, or other ways also to make it financially attractive?
Yeah, and I mean, this was really the trigger and the basic momentum of this instrument, because when you exchange your flats, you pay the same net cold rent as the previous tenant. Yeah, so the landlord is not allowed to adjust the rent when you relet the flat. So the rent, basically, you have the same rent as a tenant before. So practically, it's the instrument is quite complicated. You have to go to the digital portal, have to subscribe yourself. You have to advertise your flat. And then you have to find offers that suits you. However, you cannot see what the other people that you are writing, what they are looking for. So it might be that you're writing a lot of emails to people that not even are interested in your flat. But in the end, okay, when you agree among the two households, yeah, then it goes one step further to the landlords of the companies, and then two new lease contracts have to be signed. So, and the one of the main problems is that both households have to move on the same day. And you can imagine what kind of logistic nightmare this is. And that is one reason why a lot of initiated swap were canceled last day, because due to some organizational aspects, or when you see the apartment, then maybe the color of the wall doesn't suit you suddenly, or you feel that you are still attached to your old flat, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of obstacles, and the numbers are really low. Since 2018, since the home swap meet was established, yeah, only 311 swaps were realized. Yeah, that is only 0.2 of the entire city-owned housing stock. So that's, you see that this instrument, I think, is designed in a good way and really has like a lot of post-growth rationales behind it. But in terms of execution, it needs a lot of improvement.
Do you have an insight into supply demand? Are more people wanting to move out for something larger, let's say, or also wanting to give up a bit of space to move in maybe a smaller apartment?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges, because actually 80% of the offers are households that want to move into a bigger flat, and only 20% are households moving to a smaller flat. So there's a ratio of 4:1, and it's an extreme mismatch, of course, especially when you want to target these old people sitting in these large flats. Yeah, you see that the offer of those, or the willingness to swap, is really low at the moment.
What about the spatial scale there? Is there some way to ensure that people kind of are able to swap within their own neighborhoods where they feel attached to, or is it in principle open to, let's say, all over Berlin?
I mean, basically, it's open to the entire municipal housing stock, and that's distributed all over Berlin. But I mean, of course, you are dependent on the offers that are on the home swap meet. Yeah, so there's not a central pool managed by the housing companies with empty flats that are available for swapping. It only depends how is the offer by other households. Yeah, and that's one of the big problems, that, of course, within one neighborhood, there are not so many swapping options available. And so people, or a lot of people, want to stay within their own neighborhood. Yeah, and the options there are really limited.
So what would you say? Should one seek for opportunities to make this more attractive, to make it work by different technical administrative conditions, in terms of also maybe post-growth as a direction? Or is it, let's say, not that successful and maybe other models need to be searched for?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a question that I have asked myself. Is it like this riding a dead horse? But I wouldn't say so, because I think it's a really valuable instrument. And of course, this home swap would not solve all of the housing problems in Berlin. And of course, it should not be the only housing-related degrowth strategy. But still, I would say the Senate should keep persuading this strategy, should even try to include maybe housing associations, private owners, in order that the available housing stock for swapping gets much better, allowing you for more options to find your best fit. However, in the beginning, they really tried to give money to the people willing to swap in order to finance their movement to another, but even this was not very successful. Yeah, and another experience was that older people are really, really emotionally attached to their neighborhoods, to their furniture, to basically everything. And even when people or when the housing company approach the older person saying, okay, hey, we have here a smaller flat, are you willing to swap? They feel really angry and say, hey, well, am I not allowed to stay here for the rest of my life in my used environment? So it's really a hard challenge to get these basically older people and to overcome these emotional attachments. So there's a lot of, I think that would be one of the key to find a way to really make it attractive to overcome this emotional attachment.
But it's overall, it's also quite different way to provide housing, to manage housing. From your insights, what does it also mean for people that organize, that deal with housing, to think in these maybe new dimensions?
Yeah, I mean, one aspect really is we have to rethink the entire housing ownership. Yeah, because I mean, in Vienna, since decades, they have written home swap as a right in their rental law, and they have included housing associations and private owners and so on and so forth. And experience there show that it's especially private owners that most of the times disagree to their households to swap. So the idea of ownership has really to be rethought tremendously so that you overcome the question of, okay, I have different housing owners, I have to agree to my landlord has to agree, we have to find a solution. If you get rid of it, and if the swap is only managed among the tenants, yeah, I think one big barrier will be overcome. Yeah, so that's one central part of it. And when you talk about ownership, and of course, I mean, a rental unit has to be owned or managed in some way. We really have to think from a post-growth perspective, more of housing associations or some like community management settings. I mean, there are different approaches, even in the post-growth debate in Germany and in other countries. But I think that would be a very crucial part. So ownership, emotional attachment, and basically allowing people to move within their neighborhood. And that means we have to provide a lot of options, swap options within these housing neighborhoods.
Okay, so we are moving towards the future already. And as we both work at universities, the future is also our students and what they will do or not do in the future. And you have quite some experiences this semester with teaching also post-growth and planning at Humboldt University in Berlin. Can you maybe explain what you're doing there and what your experience so far are?
Yeah, I mean, quite some experience really relates only to this semester, because in this semester I did my first like project seminar on like post-growth perspective in the city. And what I experienced is that there is a real interest in this topic. Yeah, and that was told by students not only in the seminar, but even during a prior semester. It would be good to have this degrowth and post-growth topics really to challenge this mainstream economic thinking. So I think students are really grateful that this perspective is offered. Yeah, and I see that there is a very huge interest, not in a theoretical way, but also working empirically, going out to the field and dealing with a lot of different aspects of post-growth planning, like, I don't know, urban gardening, transportation issues, maybe even like co-working as a new form of economic post-growth. And so there is a big interest. They are very enthusiastic and very interested. And I hope, I mean, you know it, we are already really bound to a lot of obligatory classes. But I mean, I will definitely repeat this class, maybe the next time with a more intense theoretical focus. Yeah, because I think now it's an empirical course, but next time we're talking more about theory of.
What's the major challenge for students to think towards post-growth if they take an elective in that way, and when they see, no, my interest meets the course, but what does it mean to them?
I mean, I think in the first place, it means to really rethink their understanding of how economy works, or maybe how economy should work. Because in our basic course of economic geography, it's a very neoliberal way of economic thinking. And I think, I mean, that's not, I wouldn't say it's a challenge for them, because in their daily life, they are really already connected to this post-growth idea of sharing and swapping and so on and so forth. But really to understand, okay, that the whole economic system really has to change in order to realize a post-growth economy or a post-growth planning. I think that's something that they have really to learn. But I think they are really thankful for this kind of perspective, that economy could work differently than it does now.
Do you see more changes by other colleagues to other courses, also showing some interest in post-growth beyond the elective that you're offering?
To be honest, actually no, but I will, especially when we talk about housing, I will reach out to some colleagues here, not necessarily in the lab of economic geography, but just in our department, to see if there are some overlaps or interest in working together, seeing post-growth from different perspectives, maybe from a more cultural, social perspective, and so on and so forth. So I think I haven't experienced the willingness to teach, but I think within our institute, there are a lot of people which have these kind of mindset.
I'm a planner with a planning mindset, let's say. So let's move to the very final line, where I would ask you, in line of the name of this podcast as well, to finish with a sentence of post-growth planning is.
I would say post-growth planning is absolutely necessary to establish a future-oriented planning approach that respects planetary boundaries. And I mean, this line is very broad, and my take towards what is post-growth planning is very broad. But I think since post-growth planning might be quite new to teaching and research, now it's allowed to start quite broad, yeah, in the beginning, to include a lot of different perspectives, and then within the next years or decades, we have to more narrow it down.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I also see it's more maybe a mindset that needs to be there first, and then an approach that you have then can implement in a course or in practice.
Yeah, absolutely,
So,
right.
Thanks very much, Robert, for joining me today in this podcast episode, and many best regards to Berlin.
Yeah, thank you, Christian, for the invitation. I'm very happy that I could contribute. Best regards to Groningen, the Netherlands.